In German language, there are 3 tenses you can use to express actions in the past. Präteritum, which we've already looked at. Perfekt, also called Partizip 2. And Plusquamperfekt. Today, we'll focus on perfekt. Let's get started. Just like Präteritum, perfekt is also used to express completed actions in the past. The only difference between the two is that Präteritum is used for formal written language, like news articles or official letters. But perfekt is the one which is used in day-to-day life. This could be when you're talking to someone or when you're communicating with someone on social media. Let's now look at what the word order is like in perfect sentences. Any one of the helping verbs, Haben or sein, is conjugated in the present tense and is placed in the second position. And the main verb in its perfect form goes at the end of the sentence. Gestern habe ich das Mittagessen gekocht. Here we have the present form of haben in the second place and the perfect form of kochen, gekocht, in the end of the sentence. In case we are writing a Nebensatz, then the conjugated helping verb will go to the end of the sentence and the perfect form of the main verb will be placed before it, like so. Ich bin mir sicher, dass Mark gestern das Mittagessen gekocht hat. Are you with me so far? Okay. Now, the perfect form is different for regular and irregular verbs. For regular verbs, all you have to do is to add ge, ge, before the verb stem and a t in the end. Let's look at some examples. Machen becomes gemacht. Spielen becomes gespielt. Lieben becomes geliebt. What would be the perfect form for this verb? Sehr gut, gelernt. Now there are some exceptions to this rule. If a verb ends with ieren and if a verb is inseparable, then you don't have to add ge before the verb. Zum Beispiel, studieren becomes studiert. Gratulieren becomes gratuliert. Verkaufen becomes verkauft. Bezahlen becomes bezahlt, and so on. If a verb is separable, then you add ge after the prefix and the t in the end. Zum Beispiel, einkaufen becomes eingekauft. Abholen becomes abgeholt. Okay? And remember, if the verb stem ends with a d or a t, you have to add an additional e before the t. For example, arbeiten becomes gearbeitet. Öffnen becomes geöffnet. Alright? Before moving to irregular verbs, let's practice a little. Change the following verbs to their perfect forms. Richtig. Hast du auch Gitarre gespielt? The next one is richtig. Hat die Stadt besichtigt. The next one is richtig. Auf den Termin haben wir Wochen gewartet. The next one is richtig. Sie ist aufgewacht. The next one is richtig. Die Kinder haben sich über die Geschenke gefreut. And the last one is richtig. Warum hast du mich nicht telefoniert? Sehr gut. Now, irregular verbs are slightly tricky. First of all, the vowel in the verb stem changes for most of the verbs, and instead of a T, you add en in the end. For example, stehen becomes gestanden. Schreiben becomes geschrieben. Lesen becomes gelesen. Finden becomes gefunden, and so on. Here too we have some exceptions. For inseparable verbs, you let go of the ge and just add en in the end. Verstehen becomes verstanden. Verlieren becomes verloren. Befehlen becomes befohlen. And there are some irregular verbs where the ending is a T. Denken becomes gedacht. Wissen becomes gewusst. Kennen becomes gekannt. I know this is a lot to process. Just keep these pointers in mind and you just have to memorize them from your textbooks. There is no other way. Something that might be helpful is to make sentences using them or to learn verbs in their present, Präteritum and perfect forms, like so. The more you practice, the easier it'll be for you to retain them in your mind. Now the final question is, when should we use haben and when should we use sein? The answer is pretty simple. Haben is used for most of the verbs, about 90% of the verbs, including all of the modal verbs, Modalverben, and haben itself. Let's look at some examples. Max hat ein neues Handy geholt. Or ich habe Hunger gehabt. However, the perfect forms for modal verbs and haben is rarely used. Both of these verbs are commonly used in their Präteritum forms instead, okay? So instead of saying Max hat ein neues Handy geholt or ich habe Hunger gehabt, it's more common to say Max wollte ein neues Handy or ich hatte Hunger. Sein, on the other hand, is used for verbs which show a movement from point A to point B. Some of these verbs are gehen, kommen, fliegen, fahren, aussteigen, rennen, and so on. And also for verbs which show a change in the condition or state of anything. For example, wachsen, einschlafen, aufwachen, passieren, sterben, etc. The verb sein itself is also used with sein, but here too, the Präteritum form of sein is preferred. Instead of saying wir sind dankbar gewesen, wir waren dankbar would be more natural. That's it. If you found this video helpful, do consider to like and share it with your friends. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't so far. And I'll see you in the next lesson.